From idea to income. Building with the end in mind.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear us?
Good
Excellent.
morning.
So, from idea to income, building with the end in mind. It's very important, of course, to get your regulatory access and your approval, but we should always be looking with the end in mind. The real key here is the reimbursement stage, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, of course. So, too many medtech founders, they really focus on the technology of their product, which is great, but we really need to think about the regulation, the environment, the system of the healthcare that they're going to be selling into, and then, of course, the demand for it too. So, let's start off with brief introduction. So, Max, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, everyone. My name is Maxim Kholin. I'm co-founder of Gero. We one of the leaders in aging drug discovery. We use physics to model biology. We made several breakthroughs in understanding aging, built AI drug discovery platform to identify targets and find molecules, rejuvenated mice, go into dog and humans with the idea to stop aging to provide human healthy life way beyond 100 years, working with Pfizer, with Roche and other big guys.
Yeah, Lee Fleisher. I'm the former Chief Medical Officer of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services from 2020 to 2023. So I oversaw coverage decisions for CMS during that time period. I'm a practicing anesthesiologist and now have an advising firm, Rubrum Advising, who advises on market access.
Limor?
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Thank you. I'm Limor Sandach. I'm coming with 25 years of experience in management and investment of MedTech startups. I was a CEO of a dialysis company from early stages till its acquisition by Medtronic. Currently, I'm a chairwoman of Pregnan Tech, a women's health company, co-founder of NeoFlow, endovascular company for vasospasm in the brain, and advisor to Almeda Ventures.
Perfect. And last but not least, Chad.
Thanks. Chad Bonhomme. I'm a practicing cardiac electrophysiologist in Indianapolis. Also own an ambulatory surgery center that's multi-specialty, including interventional cardiology and electrophysiology, and do consulting work for early stage companies, helping them bring their products into multiple environments in the US.
So I think the first question that we should be discussing is what exactly is meant by building with the end in mind? And of course, we'll start with you, Chad. What does that mean in your world, building with the end in mind?
Ultimately, it needs to be meaningful and solve a problem. It seems like for a lot of the early stage companies, the mistake that is made is not going granular early enough. So they need to define what their end really is. And in some scenarios, taking it all the way through a commercial development is not a realistic end. But for the companies that do want to commercialize their own product, develop their own distribution, they really need to have the right people up front. And that may go all the way to a primary care physician or even a specific primary care physician or practice or location in the US so that somebody is able to break their toy early. So I think that that's really what it means to me, is bringing the right people on board early enough.
Limor, what would you have to add to that?
So when I'm looking at a company, I'm looking at as a business opportunity. Like, okay, from the market till the start. So each company needs to define its inflection points that create value. And for each company, it can be different. It can be a classic medical device that need a regulation, maybe a PMA, 510K, reimbursement, clinical, but it may be a digital health company with a different business model. So each company, through its way, should map its journey by an inflection point that define its value.
Perfect. And Lee, from a policy and reimbursement perspective, what does that mean for you?
We always start with the question of how do we get it used on patients from that patient perspective. which means two things. How is it actually brought into the care setting, and how is it reimbursed? In the US, is it part of a bundle, like many of the AI tools may be part of the physician fee schedule, or be part of how hospitals are paid, versus are they paid separately, and therefore do they need coverage for that particular device in order to be adopted? And I always focus on what is the evidence that will drive the decision maker, be it the clinician, the hospital administrator, or the insurer, in my case CMS, in making that decision.
And Max, how does that work for you from a drug perspective?
Pardon?
How does that work for you from a drug perspective? How do you build with the end in mind?
Thank you. Actually, our journey to aging field started with a funny animal, naked mole rat. We learned that we humans are having our risks of getting diseases or dying double every 8 years. And we switched from traditional drug discovery to longevity once we understood that there is funny animal, naked mole rat. It lives roughly 10 times longer than than rodents of this size, but the most important thing, its mortality curve is not increasing. And it went under the radars until Google made a special company, California Life Company, headed by current chairman of Apple, Arthur Levinson. He previously sold Genentech company to Roche for $50 billion. They published 2 papers saying actually they don't see increase in the mortality. We believe this is the biggest discovery in the current biology. And now we understand that 1/3 of all bats are not aging, some whales, some sharks, some turtles, some otters. So from this point, we saw the end very clear. We understood that aging is not the law of nature, and we should try to make it for humans. And to do that, we built the technology. My partner is one of the top-cited physicists in the world. We applied physics to model biology, got the access to 100 million electronic medical records and multi-omics data from the UK and the US, and built the biggest model of the human health, which predicts the next few years of the human health. And using this technology, we understood that most of the human aging is irreversible, and applied this vision first with deal with Pfizer. We filtered out irreversible part and gave them what is left behind. After that, we have the deal with Roche based on our understanding of aging. Now we using this technology for aging-related diseases and aging itself. We rejuvenated mice, now going to dogs and humans. The idea is that this is one of the most transformative things we can imagine. So drug discovery technology with AI and physics, access to big data, this is our tools to reach to our mission.
So the key takeaways from that is we have the 3 R's. And what do I mean by that? Regulation, reimbursement, and revenue. So we'll start off with you, Maxim. So as a founder, how do you balance these 3 from the start?
So somehow,
Balance, regulation.
yeah, thank you. The issue is that aging is not recognized as a disease yet. And we had this problem with obesity as a humanity. It took a few decades to convince people to recognize obesity as a disease. So we literally have the issue to resolve. We should be proactive in terms of regulations. And the FDA now allowed to make a TAME study. It is the study to delay the onset of the second age-related disease after the first age-related disease came already. So it just opened one of the ways to develop therapies against aging. But we will be much more proactive. We will demand the recognition aging as a disease, which will create the landscape for reimbursement and regulations, because otherwise it's much more complicated. So we should be active here.
So Lee, what's your view on that? Regulatory is one piece, but how do you get to reimbursement?
So it's interesting that you started with getting the FDA to recognize it as a disease, but then reimbursement. So CMS has a statutory obligation to only pay for things that are reasonable and necessary for the diagnosis or treatment of an illness or injury. I'm not sure how you're going to get Congress to say aging is an illness. It would actually have to create a new what's called benefit category. CMS in the United States only has the authority to pay for things that Congress has given it the authority. So much of the AI that's being shown here cannot be paid for yet. Screening technologies can only be paid for if they're actually recognized by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force. And aging would be a difficult disease per se because it's not necessarily recognized. So reimbursement would follow what Congress says it's allowed to reimburse for. And then the key, and many founders start with 510K, but CMS needs that there's clinical utility. The reasonable and necessary means there's enough evidence to show it not only does what the predicate does, but it itself shows that it improves some disease state, some outcome. It does not, CMS never looks at cost. It really focuses on clinical utility, and that's what we tend to focus our clients, and as well as when I oversaw the program, on this idea of showing how it improved an illness and what illness means.
Yeah, could I add a couple of words just to tell that we have passed like prevention of age-related diseases, multiple age-related diseases. Recognition aging as a disease will just make our life easier in terms of clinical trials, in terms of everything. But we have some passes like in traditional regulatory landscape.
Yeah, it will take Congress some time unless it's done under the authorities of the Innovation Center.
So Limor, maybe from your side, as maybe from an investment perspective, how do you balance this and what do you look for in founders for the 3 Rs?
So you need to balance that and you need to take it equally. They are equally important. It's not just, what is the clinical need, because at the end, if there is no one to pay for that, you don't have a business. So you need to relate both for the clinical, the economical, the financial, and the business opportunity from the beginning. And you mentioned the 3R. There are also the 3P, which is payer, provider, and patient. Each company is in the medical space has different stakeholders. And in order to be successful, you need to relate to the different stakeholders and find out who's the key point to start with. And sometimes it's clinical, sometimes it's reimbursement, but for example, with many digital health companies that does not require clinical or does not require reimbursement, the business model is different. First go to payer, first go to employers. So I think that the 3R with the 3P find the right metrics for you, and remember, it's not just the clinical, it's the business, the market opportunity, and the check in the end. And this is the reason that you mentioned reimbursement. It should be from the beginning, because if you are doing like a clinical study, and then after 2 years of completing that, you actually find out that you didn't collect a financial milestone and financial data, you need to go back again. So need to think about it from the beginning, the all metrics, and not just the clinical and regulation.
And Chad, what's been your experience of this process? I'm guessing it wasn't very easy for you.
Well, I think we can talk about just maybe for a minute the CPT 3 codes, or the emerging technology codes, and of course Lee can speak to this ad nauseum as well. But when you're placing a device or a product for somebody, you really have to choose where you're going to do it. And in the US, it is quite variable state by state. So, for example, there's one particular device that we're using in Indiana, and we had introduced it into Florida, and the results there were quite good in terms of reimbursement. Same with Oklahoma, very good in Texas, but when it came to Indiana, there was no data. And then after the fact, the reimbursement wasn't so good. And so my home state, Indiana, is noticed sort of a stress test in this environment. But you end up having to manage a couple of things. One is the company itself needs to have a scenario analysis and what they're going to do for that provider who is basically taking on a risk in some way. It could just be a credibility risk, but they could be taking on a financial risk, and they may not realize what that's going to be until 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, or even perhaps they tried it for the first time and the product had a failure point that hadn't been seen before. So the company needs to know how they're going to deal with that scenario. I think that's probably the biggest thing that needs to be sorted out for the company is they need to internally need to have a person or a process that they can go to make things right. Because what you don't want to do is have negative emotions or negative energy, because that's when you start to lose control and confidence. There's no emotional durability, and the person that you're really wanting to help you iterate your product starts to take a step back.
So Lee, I know you've got to follow up on what Chad has just discussed. What's your view on this?
So I agree, but I have one caveat, because a lot of these companies think, why not fit into a current CPT code, because there's payment for that CPT code. But the current administration in the US, as I'm sure you've heard, Dr. Oz keeps talking about fraud, waste, and abuse. And they're using a lot of AI to detect that all of a sudden a CPT code, which has been going along at some low level, all of a sudden gets this marked increase, and they'll start looking, is it a device that's never had enough evaluation to show it works? And they'll claw back, take back the money that's already been paid through some of the audits. So we actually think a CPT-3 code is a good way to go with a new device, or a HCPCS code from CMS, so that you actually get coverage for what you're doing, not fit into somebody else's as a me too.
And there are other scenarios as well where it's not quite known, but some companies may be trying to leverage CPT-1 codes as sequential codes, but they don't know yet how that is going to play out. So there's a little bit of turbulence there, a little bit of danger, but their models are based on sequential CPT-1s.
So following on from that, I suppose, and we'll stick with you and Chad, and we've been discussing this offline, of course, is what exactly makes a medtech or drug company investable today? What were the things that you'll be looking for before investing in a company?
For me, when I'm evaluating companies, I really want to know if they have their end in mind, which is why I really like this topic, and if they're realistic about it. And if they do have that end in mind, are they in a position from an organizational standpoint that they can bring in the right people? Do they recognize that they need help in bringing in the right people, and are they able to do it? Because if they're not set up in a way where they can appropriately compensate for the right people to come on, then they're going to just end up spinning their wheels and spending a whole lot of time, maybe over the next year or 2 years, and not get to where they want to be. So for me, it's all about getting the right people on board quickly. If they're able to do that, that's a good start. If they're not, I'm out.
So Limor, with your experience of sitting on various different boards as an entrepreneur, what are the things that you look for in a company from an investment perspective?
So getting in cultivation to what you say, looking at the end, when I'm looking at a new company, an investment, as an investor, we would like to see if the company understands how to reach a return of investment. At the end, a venture capital or a fund is investing for a business reason, to make money, making good, we are in healthcare and so on. But at the end, a company needs to understand what are the milestones and define those milestones that create this liquidation event. It can be through an acquisition, it can be through IPO, and each company should know its market and look at other companies, comparable companies, to see what were the milestones that they reach in order to get acquired. For example, is it a pivotal study? Because you are bringing something very innovative, so you perform like 200 patients, very impressive, and you know that the FDA approval we get to this transaction, or you are an add-on company or some kind of feature that although you have the 510K, you still need to do clinical, as Lee mentioned, and you still have to get to center and have some revenue. And that was the case with the company that I was running, AV Medical, that required to get to the US market to like 10 centers, and then Medtronic was interested in acquisition of the company. So an investor would like to see that the company understand, what it takes and the time it takes for such an event, because unfortunately at the end, we all care about the patient, but it's a business. So you need to show that to your investors.
I think that's the trap that a lot of founders and CEOs fall into, is they try to sell the technology, which may be great, but is there a business at the end of it? Is it going to sell, which is a different story. So Lee, what sort of evidence do you look for in a company to say, yep, that's definitely investable?
Well, ironically, while I was waiting for the flight here, I actually had a call with a VC that was investing in one of the companies that we're advising in the rehab space. It's a MedTech device. And the question was, why don't we go for a local coverage decision or a national coverage decision? And we said, with the evidence they have now, there's a greater chance that they will get non-covered than actually get covered, and that's the kiss of death. If the plans start to say, and we said we've been having a strategy, they just finished their randomized trial, which was pivotal. They have 87 patients in their first trial. They're starting to collect lots of real-world data, and we actually gave them a multi-month, multi-year strategy of they're getting paid their claims now. They're getting paid on a claim-by-claim adjudication. That's a good thing. So we sort of explained to the investors how we actually had this strategy. We were collecting the data. As Limor sort of said, we were collecting the right data. We had gone from a simple functional requirement to functional status. What more can they do beyond a simple measure? And we think, and they've had 1,000 claims paid now to date, we think that within about 6 to 12 months, and really the insurers want published data. They can't go in and say, we've got the trial, we have table 1. They need to actually publish it or have it in publication before it can be in press. So that's what we focus on, that sometimes going faster can actually do more harm if you're doing well.
And Maxim, it'd be quite interesting to get your view from a drug perspective. Would you say it aligns with MedTech, or would you say the system is slightly different there?
Maybe it's almost the same. Our story is interesting because we have very complex motivation of the investors who are investing in us. First of all, the prediction, population is aging. Aging is a huge problem, and the prediction of the revenues from the single drug against aging is like more than $200 billion per year. And several smart guys, extremely good in predicting future, like Jeff Bezos, Sam Altman, Coinbase founder, each of them funded startups in aging field already. But I agree also that science matters a lot. Nature magazine just recognized the approach that we suggested, applying physics to aging as a Gero physics new field of science. It was critical for several our investors as well to have like solid science on that. But the funniest, not for the funniest, it was fun at the moment. One of our investors told that he had a long conversation with ChatGPT, telling him, like, look, I'm a wealthy guy. I want to live as long as possible. What should I do? Don't tell me about healthy life. Tell me something real. You should invest into the longevity company to get the early access to the information and the technology. This was the answer. So this is a complicated thing now because it is the biggest next thing in business, but also it's about personal life, the life of your family, the life of billions of people. actually the most impactful thing that you can do in this generation, like the next step in evolution. So we don't think about ourselves as yet another project. It's about changing the everything. So it motivates us, it motivates our investors. So I believe that this kind of narrative helps a lot to us and our competitors to raise funds to fund our mission.
Sure. And I think another challenge that comes across is what works in one jurisdiction may not work in the other. And like what Lee was touching on to, the 510K program may be faster, but it's not always better. I think the key takeaway here is speed is not, it's not always about going about the fastest path. It's about going where your product is going to have the most impact and that makes sense for you, and there's end patients there from there. So going on from that, Chad, how do you go about scaling into different countries? So let's just say, hypothetically, you've got your approval in the US and the EU. How do you determine success on a global scale?
You know, we've had a product that we introduced in Australia, and then we introduced it into the Czech Republic, and then to Germany, and then to France, and brought it to the US, and the rules had changed, and it was an AI, let's say, product, really before AI was really even talked about. It was this machine learning product. And the rules had changed on this, and the company I was working with brought it to the FDA just after the rules had changed, and it just so happened that Boston and Medtronic had had their submissions in earlier, like 2 years earlier. So I think that really success is, it's paying attention to what is going on and forecasting, and you have to have that person on your team because there's just so much to pay attention to that no one person can do it themselves. I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I can give, because that honestly, that led to a 4-year problem.
Excellent. And that brings us on to the last question, which you've already answered, Chad. So excellent. So Limor, of course, what one line would you say as your biggest piece of advice to a medtech founder that might be with us today?
I think that pointed out several times, think from the beginning on the business, who is going to pay? You know, who is going to pay and what are the milestones to get there? And as long as you understand that from the beginning and validated that, it will be easier. It may change, you know, and Medtronic and Boston can change in dynamic, but always look for who is going to pay. This is the line that I'm leaving you.
Perfect. And Lee, would you add to that?
I think Limor's sort of who's going to pay, but the interesting thing is there's different payment paradigms, and don't always think there's one strategy. That sometimes you may go into a value-based contract and you may go to Kaiser in the US or go to the UK and get your evidence there. So it may be worth going smaller, collecting the evidence to show, and then expanding to other markets as you're learning based upon who's going to pay. But design that very early. Almost, we say almost before you go to the FDA. Build that in.
And Max, what would be your advice to a founder today? What one piece of advice would you be leaving them with?
I love to repeat here the words of one of our founding investors, Yuri Melnichuk. He sold company to Google, to Pinterest, to Farfetch. He told that you should try to do something that most of others thinks is impossible. So once you do that, but this is the opportunity to have. Like if you do the boring stuff, it's boring.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the talk today. I would like to thank everyone here for their voices as well. And the one piece of advice that I would give to everyone here is focus on the end patient and the impact that you're going to make. And with that focus in mind, the success will follow. Thank you very much for your time, guys.